Title: Inside Indiana's Death Row, Where Time Stops Before Execution. Help this channel grow. Like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe for more stories. This helps us a lot. Thank you. The story begins. The chamber where time stands still. The gates of Indiana State Prison rise out of the gray skyline of Michigan City like something out of another century. Thick limestone walls, iron doors, and the silent echo of footsteps on concrete floors. This is the home of Indiana's death row, where 11 men wait in a place that exists between life and death, a purgatory built by the state. For most of them, time has stopped. Not because the clock no longer moves, but because their lives have been reduced to waiting for a day that may never come. It's been 8 years since the last execution in Indiana. Yet deep inside the prison, behind steel gates and flickering fluorescent lights, a new death chamber gleams, freshly painted and used and waiting. The presence of that room sends a quiet but unmistakable message. The state still intends to kill again. When journalists are escorted through the corridors, even the air feels heavier. The warden's voice echoes through the hall, low, calm, rehearsed. "This is where it ends," he says, stopping at a door marked execution room. Behind it, 2 sterile beds rest under bright hospital lights. One for the condemned, one for the witness of justice. It's not bloodstained, not violent, not chaotic, just still. And that stillness is what makes it terrifying. Among the 11 men living under these lights is Benjamin Ritchie, who has been on death row for over 15 years. He was convicted of killing a police officer, a single bullet that changed his life forever. "If that bullet had hit half an inch lower," he once said, "he'd be alive and I'd just be doing time." Instead, Ritchie lives each day knowing the state could call his number at any moment. But in recent years, executions have stopped, not because of mercy, but because drug manufacturers refuse to sell the chemicals used for lethal injections. For Ritchie, that uncertainty is its own kind of punishment. "I could get a date at any time," he admits, "but maybe I never will." His cell is smaller than a parking space, 7 feet by 12, with walls that trap the same stale air year after year. A steel bunk, a toilet, a desk carved with names of men who've long since died or disappeared into the system. The lights never go out. There's no true darkness here, only a faint hum from the ceiling fixtures, and the endless ticking of time that no longer means anything. Every few days he's allowed out for a shower, handcuffed, shackled, and escorted by guards in riot gear. In those brief minutes, the sound of running water is almost sacred. It's the only thing that reminds him the world outside still moves. For the rest of the day, the cell becomes a coffin with breathing space. He fills the time with letters, memories, and regrets. "It's not living," he once said. "It's just not dying yet." Elsewhere on the row sits Frederick Bear, a man whose crime, the murder of a woman and her young daughter, made him one of the most hated prisoners in the state. To the others, he's known by a different name, Susie. They spit at his cell, throw food, whisper curses when guards pass by. "I live every day," he says quietly, "knowing I'll never see the sky without bars." His story raises a question that echoes across every tier. When a man has already lost everything, what more can the state take from him? The warden, a stoic figure in his 60s, walks the row every morning, speaking softly through the bars. "You're all human beings," he tells them. But his eyes betray a truth he never says aloud. This place was not built for humanity. It was built for control. And control, in a place where every soul is waiting to die, is a fragile illusion. The prison psychologist once described death row as a living museum of regret. Every inmate has a story that ends the same way: a trial, a sentence, and then silence. The walls are covered in scratches, Bible verses, and fragments of names. Some carved to pass time. Others carved to be remembered. At night, the wind off Lake Michigan carries the faint sound of gulls. The men can't see them, but they hear them, free, distant, untouchable. Outside, the world sleeps. Inside, the condemned count hours they no longer own. Here, in Indiana's oldest prison, time doesn't heal anything. It doesn't move forward. It circles endlessly, like the lights above the death chamber, cold, constant, and waiting. When the prison stopped breathing. By early 2025, Indiana State Prison had turned into a pressure cooker of fear, addiction, and despair. What was once a fortress of routine had descended into chaos. The men on death row were no longer just waiting for execution. They were trying to survive each other, their minds, and the system slowly crumbling around them. The lockdown started quietly. A few inmates collapsed during morning roll call, trembling and sweating on the concrete floors. Then another. Then another. Within days, dozens were convulsing, gasping for air. Guards shouted codes over radios. Signal 3000. Medical emergency. Words that became a haunting echo down every corridor. The culprit was spice, a synthetic drug smuggled in through mail and visitors. What began as an escape from monotony became an epidemic that almost shut the prison down. Captain Bowen, a correctional officer for 2 decades, described it simply. "We had 40 overdoses in a single weekend. I've never seen it like this. The men weren't sleeping. They weren't eating. They were falling apart." For nearly 5 weeks, the entire prison was sealed under 24-hour lockdown. Doors slammed, food trays slid through narrow slots, and the corridors fell silent except for the occasional scream from a cell. No yard time. No calls. No visits. The men who already lived in cages found their world shrink even smaller. Christopher Pavey, who'd spent 30 years behind these walls, said it felt like suffocation. "In my whole time here, we've never been locked down this long. Some guys start to lose their minds after a few days. This was a month. You could hear them talking to walls." Outside, the snow melted into gray puddles, but inside, time didn't move. The air turned stale, thick with sweat and hopelessness. For the inmates, even punishment began to lose meaning. One of them whispered through the bars, "We're already dead. They just forgot to bury us." As the lockdown dragged on, the mental strain became unbearable. Guards found men staring blankly into space, muttering to ghosts. One prisoner was discovered having carved the same sentence over and over on his wall. "They forgot we exist." Another smeared ink from a pen on his arms, pretending it was blood just to feel alive. Not everyone made it through. At least 2 men died that month. One from overdose, another by suicide. The chaplain described walking through the tears afterward. "You can smell despair," he said. "It's not just sadness. It's the smell of men who've stopped believing they're human." Even the staff began to unravel. Guards worked double shifts, haunted by what they saw. One officer admitted off camera, "You stop seeing them as monsters when you have to pick one up off the floor after he's been convulsing for 10 minutes. You see a human being and that messes with you." After 35 days, the lockdown finally lifted. The heavy metal gates creaked open, and sunlight poured across the concrete yard for the first time in over a month. The men stepped out, blinking, disoriented. For some, it was the first time they'd seen the sky in weeks. They walked in slow circles, silent, staring upward as if afraid the light might vanish again. It wasn't freedom, just air. But to them it was everything. Among the first out was Ronald Sanford, who'd entered prison as a teenager and spent nearly his entire life inside. He'd learned to survive by reading and writing, building a world in his head when the real one was too cruel. Watching him now, you could see both wisdom and exhaustion in his eyes. "The mind goes where the body can't," he said. "That's how you stay alive in here." In the aftermath of the lockdown, the prison administration promised reform. Stricter mail inspections, mental health screenings, better staff support. But the truth was clear. Indiana's oldest prison was cracking from within. Overcrowding, addiction, and despair had turned it into a place where survival replaced rehabilitation. For the men on death row, the drug epidemic was more than a health crisis. It was a reflection of something deeper. A place designed to deliver justice had become a monument to human decay. The state called it control. The inmates called it slow dying. When asked about the chaos, one guard summed it up best. "We didn't just lose control of the prison. We lost control of time. Days, nights, it all blended together. Nobody breathed right again after that." And so, in a place where executions had stopped, death found another way in. The weight of silence. After the lockdown ended, the prison tried to return to what it called normal operations. But normal was an illusion. The men on death row were breathing, eating, and talking. But the silence between words said more than any conversation could. The echo of chains, the shuffle of boots, the clang of a door closing, these were the sounds of time moving nowhere. The routines resumed, but something had changed inside everyone. Guards spoke less. Inmates stared longer. Hope, which had been fragile before, now felt like a forgotten language. For years, the death chamber at Indiana State Prison had been dormant, a gray, sterile room awaiting its purpose. It was built to carry out executions with precision. A gurney bolted to the floor, bright surgical lights overhead, and 2 glass viewing rooms separated by a thin wall, one for the victim's family, the other for the condemns. No one had been executed there since 2016, yet the room was spotless, always ready. As one guard put it, "It's like they're waiting for the world to decide whether to turn the lights back on." The warden's dilemma. Warden Bill Wilson knew that his duty was to enforce the law, not to question it. But years of walking those corridors, hearing the same men count their days, had worn him down. "Every morning I say the same thing," he admitted quietly. "Good morning, gentlemen. But what I really mean is, you're still here." The state had built a new execution chamber in 2024, cleaner, more modern, designed for humane procedure. It had never been used, and perhaps that was its own mercy. "We built it," Wilson said, "because the law requires it. But no one talks about what it does to the people who have to stand inside it." He wasn't talking about the condemned. He meant the officers, the nurses, the chaplain. The ones who must watch a man's last breath and return to their posts the next day as if nothing happened. The condemned speak. Among those still waiting was Frederick Bear, the inmate shunned by everyone, both prisoners and guards. His crime was the murder of a woman and her 4-year-old daughter, and the other inmates had branded him a baby killer. He lived in near total isolation, not for punishment but protection. "I know I'll die here," he said through the bars one afternoon. "I don't know when, and that's worse. Some nights I think about asking them to just do it." Bear's eyes, pale and unblinking, revealed a man trapped between guilt and denial. "I loved kids," he said. "I don't even understand why I did what I did. Drugs, fear, anger. But when the drugs fade, you're left with the pictures in your head. They don't fade." For years he'd been the most hated man on death row. Other inmates threw food, shouted slurs, and spat in his direction. One poured bleach into his meal. The guards looked away. "You stop fighting after a while," Bear said. "You just stop being human." Nearby was William Clyde Gibson, a serial killer whose crimes defied comprehension. He'd confessed to 3 murders, and hinted at dozens more. In his first interview he'd said, "I could kill someone and go out to dinner. It didn't matter." But sitting across from him years later, he looked older, thinner, and somehow emptier. His voice was almost casual as he admitted, "They think they know all of it, but they don't. I'll take the rest with me." When asked if he felt remorse, he laughed, a hollow sound that filled the tiny interview room. "If I did, it wouldn't change anything," he said. "They'd still be dead. I'd still be here." The interviewer, shaken, asked him what he feared most. Gibson thought for a moment and replied, "Not dying. Living like this forever. Life without death." One inmate who escaped execution was Paul McManus, who'd spent 13 years on death row for killing his wife and 2 children. After a successful appeal, his sentence was reduced to life without parole. But when asked if he felt relief, his answer stunned everyone. "No," he said. "It's worse. On death row you know when it ends. Here you just fade away." He touched the tattoos on his arm, 3 names for the family he murdered. "I see them every day when I shave," he said softly. "They remind me I don't deserve peace." For men like McManus, the death chamber was not the true punishment. It was the years before it, the decades of silence, the replay of memories, the slow erosion of self. The child who never grew up. Then there was Ronald Sanford, one of the youngest offenders in the prison's history. He entered at 15 after murdering 2 elderly neighbors. Now in his 50s, Sanford had spent more time inside than he ever had outside. His cell was filled with books, pages marked with quotes from Nelson Mandela. "I was trained to be violent," he said. "My mother was drunk most days, my father was gone, and by 13 I thought hurting people was normal." But Sanford was different from the others. He'd found purpose, not freedom but something like understanding. "You can't fix the past," he said. "But maybe you can build something out of what's left." When his mother visited after 30 years, she wept. "I didn't raise a killer," she told him. But Sanford disagreed. "You raised me to survive," he said. "And that's what I've done." The execution chamber. The new death chamber remains unused, its silence louder than any protest. Rows of chairs face the gurney. 2 phones hang on the wall, one for the governor, one for the warden. The phones have never rung, but everyone knows what it would mean if they did. When asked whether Indiana would ever resume executions, the warden hesitated. "We might," he said. "But maybe we shouldn't." The drug manufacturers have refused to sell the chemicals needed for lethal injections, forcing states into an uneasy pause. Some call it mercy. Others call it delay. Inside these walls, it's simply more waiting. The chaplain, who has prayed over men moments before death, said it best. They think death is the end of punishment. It's not. It's the years before it. That's the real execution. The moral question. Outside the prison, life continues. Cars pass by on US Highway 12. Children play in the park. The lake glitters in the distance. None of them can see the men locked away behind those stone walls. men who will never again feel the wind without steel between them and the world. And yet, behind every sentence, behind every crime, there is still the question that divides America. Should we kill those who kill? Some believe it's justice, a necessary act to honor the victims. Others see it as another act of violence, one that changes nothing. Inside Indiana's death row, that debate isn't theoretical. It's the air they breathe. At sunset, the light from Lake Michigan bleeds through the barred windows, painting the concrete in shades of gold. The men look out, not at freedom but at the horizon they'll never touch. As night falls, the lights hum on again, indifferent and eternal. In this place where time stands still, punishment never ends. It only echoes, in footsteps, in memories, and in the quiet that follows every locked door.